Hi everyone and welcome to Chest Binding 101. My name is Jameson, he, him pronouns, and I'm from the DC area Trans Masculine Society. So whether you're interested in binding yourself or really just want some more information about that process, I hope that this video will help you. At the DC area Trans Masculine Society, or what we call DCATS for short, we've been running a binder exchange program for the last few years. This program donates new and generally used binders to folks all across the US who are in financial need. So because of us running this program for the last few years, it's really put us in a good position to educate other people about how to bind safely and how to choose a binder that will work best for them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I hope that this information is helpful to you all. So here's a few things we'll be talking about today. First, we'll discuss what binding is exactly and who might choose to bind. Then we're going to discuss how to bind safely and what are some common signs that you might not be doing so. Then we'll discuss various styles and brands of binders and which are right for you based on your preferences and body type. Then we're going to discuss sizing and how you can size yourself. And lastly, we'll discuss some programs that exist to help folks get a binder for free if they can't afford one. So let's go ahead and begin. So what is binding? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Chest binding is compressing the chest to make it appear flatter. We'll be talking about binding specifically in the context of trans masculine folks, which can include trans men and non-binary identifying people who may choose to bind their chest to appear flatter because their chest is a source of gender dysphoria. Chest binding is a method used by trans folks to alleviate gender dysphoria related to their chest. Many trans folks may choose to bind only sometimes, and some don't bind at all, especially if they don't have any gender dysphoria related to their chest. Some trans folks may want to bind but cannot due to health reasons. So in short, binding isn't really a determinant of whether or not someone is trans or trans masculine, and it doesn't make anyone more or less trans. So technically you can bind your chest with many different types of material, such as tape and bandages and so forth, but the safest way to do so, and to do so on a regular basis, is to use a binding garment made specifically for binding your chest, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is how people can use these binders, these garments made specifically for binding your chest safely, and how they can find the one that works best for them. So you might be wondering how many trans masculine people actually bind. Well, actually a whole lot. So according to the Mount Sinai Transgender Health Program based out of New York, who surveyed 500 of their patients aged 8 to 23, 95% of them said that they bind their chest. So this is a huge percentage of the trans population and the trans masculine population. But unfortunately, unsafe binding practices are very prevalent. And we're going to go through some of those in the next slide. But just real quickly before we do, you might be wondering, why is unsafe binding practices so prevalent? Well, a lot of this is due to lack of education. So lots of the material that I'm going to present to you today isn't well known by lots of members of the community. Also, just lack of funds to buy a good quality binder. Folks might know that the binder they're using isn't good quality and is putting them in an unsafe position, but they lack the money to buy another one that can make their experience much better. And also just the lack of a supportive community that makes them feel safe taking breaks from binding. Binding isn't something that you can do 24/7, so if you're wearing a binder longer than it's intended to be worn, the likelihood that you're going to experience some of these negative effects is much greater. And if you don't have an environment where you feel safe and not binding, then the likelihood that you're going to wear that binder longer than it's intended goes up even more. So here are some of the most commonly reported issues with binding. This actually comes from a survey of about 2,000 trans masculine individuals. And so let's just go over some of these reported issues so that it can help you identify if there's something going on that's abnormal with your binding as well. So overall, nearly everyone who has ever bound their chest has had some kind of negative side effect. And according to this group, 89% of the people surveyed experienced at least one of the side effects on this chart. I also want to note that this data comes from folks who were not using binder garments as well, so take that with a grain of salt. But the main thing here is that when you start binding, you're probably going to come up with one of these negative side effects. But the idea is that if you learn to bind safely and understand, what binders work best for your body, there really should be no reason that you are having one of these issues ongoing, right? So here's a breakdown of some of the most common issues. 77% of people saw some issues with skin irritation, whether that's mild chafing or blistering, right? There's different levels of severity with all these things. 75% had some kind of pain, most commonly in their back, chest, neck, or shoulders. This is often due to an incorrect size. 64% experienced some kind of overheating or fatigue. If your binder material is made out of something that's not well ventilated, it can cause you to overheat, particularly if you're wearing a thick one during the summer. 51% had some kind of respiratory issue, which could be difficulty breathing, shortness of breath. This is, very serious and often due to incorrect sizing as well. 49% experienced some kind of musculoskeletal issue, which would be something like bad posture, or at the highest severity, even something like fractured ribs. And 25% experience some kind of stomach or digestive issues from their binder, which often happens if you have a binder that is also compressing your stomach and not just your chest. So just here are some of the issues that have come up, and obviously the severity really determines whether this is just some growing pains of getting used to wearing a binder, or something that's ongoing that really has to do with some unsafe binding practices that you might be having, or just having a binder that's not suited well for your body, either based on the style or based on the size that it is. So the main takeaway here that I want you to get is that binding isn't inherently dangerous, but binding can be very dangerous when you do something, when you bind with something other than a binder garment, or when you don't practice safety guidelines, or when you don't get the correct size or style for your body. But if you do all these things, you should see little to no side effects while binding. So next we're going to go into some of those safety tips, and again, how to bind yourself, or how to bind yourself correctly and how to measure yourself correctly when picking a binder. Okay, so here's some specific safety tips. First and foremost, you just have to make sure you get the right size. Binder sizes are not based on bra sizes or t-shirt sizes. Binder sizes also vary by brand and are even different between styles of the same brand. So take the time to measure yourself accurately. You won't regret it, and this is the #1 way to make sure that you get a binder that fits you. The easiest way to avoid hurting yourself is to take breaks from binding and to listen to your body. Even a well-sized binder isn't safe to wear for more than about 9 hours a day, and you should definitely not sleep in a binder. If your body is hurting, or you're having difficulty breathing, or any of the other side effects that we described in the chart earlier, this could be a sign that the binder is too small, or it's a sign that you've been wearing your binder too long. So some people's bodies can't actually wear a binder for the full 9 hours without taking a break, even though that's the max limit on how often or how long you can wear most binders. Some people's bodies won't be able to make it to that point. So if you are experiencing pain or some of these other side effects prior to 9 hours, it could have nothing to do with the binder not actually fitting you. It could have to do with you are just one of those people that needs to take more breaks. Other safety tips, don't layer binders with other binders, or don't layer your binder with anything else restrictive like a tight sports bra. You don't want to be double binding. Binders were not made to be used in this fashion. So once you take something that is safe, like a binder garment made for binding, but then use it in a way that's not meant to be used, well, then it becomes an unsafe binding practice. But if your binder doesn't fit well, don't try to use something else to make it compress more. Simply use it as is until you're able to get a new binder. Also, when being active, it is safe to bind using a chest binder, but it is recommended to wear one size larger than you would usually wear. It's also much safer to use a binder with more breathable material to reduce the likelihood of overheating, or to pick a style of a binder that allows more flexibility than some of the others. And we'll go into that a little bit more later. And lastly, you want to make sure you wash your binder regularly. Bacteria can collect on these binders and make it more likely that you'll have adverse skin reactions. Skin irritants were one of the most common negative side effects of binding, and a lot of it can be due to hygiene. So make sure you keep your binder clean to avoid this. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the different styles of binders that you might find and which might work best for you. The three we're going to discuss are full tank binders, half tank binders, and racerback binders, which come in full and half tanks. Half tank binders look a lot like tank tops, but they cut off right below your rib cage. Lots of people of all sizes like half tanks because they have the least amount of fabric needed to bind your chest, which is great if you live somewhere where the weather gets quite hot. However, some people with longer torsos or a bit of a belly might find the half tanks ride up and become uncomfortable, which leads them to having to adjust the binder, pull it down throughout the day, or even worse, sometimes they can ride up and dig into your skin, which can become painful, if not at least annoying, and cause a lot of that skin irritation that some people report. Others don't like these half binders because they remind them of sports bras and actually makes them feel more dysphoric when they wear them. Okay, moving on to full tank binders. They can also ride up, but this issue is solved a little bit easier because they're usually long enough that you can tuck them into your pants or your shorts, whatever you're wearing. Also, a lot of larger chested folks may prefer long binders because you just have more material to bind and to distribute your tissue. And other people prefer long tanks because they just like how they look underneath a overshirt. They just look like a tank top underneath, versus maybe some people think that the shorts or the half tank binders look like more like a sports bra. Okay, racerback binders, like I said, they can come in long or half tanks. More commonly, you do see them in half tanks. The main difference between the racerback and some of the other styles is that you see that the tank straps in the back are angled inward, which allows for more range of movement. So they're usually seen with these shorter tanks because people are using this type of binder when they're more active, so they want less fabric. People also like the racerback because it's harder to see if you wear like a tank top over it, because the straps are much further in to your shoulders, so you don't see it underneath another tank top. And others have reported that they like the racerback, or that the racerback does bind a little bit tighter than tank tops with just a regular type of straps, and that could be just due to the construction of the straps themselves. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about binder closures. Every binder will have a different style: half tank, long tank, racerback, but they'll also have different ways in which they close. So the most commonly seen style for binder closure is actually the pullover. And these are put on by pulling the binder over your head, much like you would put on a shirt. And if you haven't used the binder before, this could be a little awkward at first to get it on and off because it's a tight, basically like a really tight tank top that you're putting on. But as long as the binder is the right size, it shouldn't be painful, and you should get the hang of it after a few tries. Next are the Velcro binders, which is another great option, but they're actually much harder to find. They're great for folks with less experience binding because you put the binder on kind of like a vest and then secure the Velcro on your side. So it's a lot easier. There's not as much straining to put it on and off if you're not used to it. You should avoid binders that close with the Velcro down the middle of your chest. They're not recommended, don't have the same pros as this side Velcro closure that you can see in the picture on the slide. Velcro binders also allow you to to bind at different levels depending on your activity. So maybe for normal activities, you bind a little tighter, but while working out, you have this, 2 or 3 inches of clearance where you can bind much looser. So Velcro binders allow for this flexibility in a way that these pullover binders do not. But some of the downsides are that Velcro binders, as they get older, you might have to keep binding tighter to get the same effect. So you would probably have to replace these binders a little bit more often than the pullovers. Also, if you sweat a lot, it can weaken the seal between the Velcro, which might cause it to release. I have personally used these Velcro binders while working out before and got particularly sweaty one day, and it did actually come undone while working out, but it's only happened once, but it is something that can happen and you should be aware of. Okay, last but not least, the least popular style of binders are these clasp or zipper binders. So they close using some kind of zipper mechanism or a metal clasp, kind of like what you would see on some bras. Typically they're on the side, but you can find some of them that close down the center of the chest as well. These are the least common, least popular type, and that's because most folks think these types of binders are unsafe, but it's not necessarily true. There used to be a few brands back in the day that used these clasp or zipper mechanisms that were just unsafe binders. And so people started to associate these types of closing mechanisms with being unsafe. There are many bad binder brands, unknown brands that use these mechanisms. So if you see a zipper or clasp binder that you really like, you should really make sure that it comes from a reputable brand before you purchase it. Also, you should make sure that the binder is using breathable fabric. It's just more common with these style binders to not have very breathable fabric. So you should also watch out for that. But there are some reputable brands that do make zipper binders at least. Okay, so let's talk about some of the more common brands now. So in the US, we're lucky to have many binder brands. I'm not going to go through them all, but here's 4 popular brands that make excellent binders. So the first one is my favorite, GC2B. They're also a supporter of DCAT's binder exchange program, and they make some of the most affordable, comfortable binders out there. They're also trans-owned and donate many binders to programs across the world, so I think they're just a good company to support. You'll find only pullover binders here, but they have half tank, full tank, and racerback styles, and their binders are okay to swim in. So they're made out of material that won't corrode in chlorine or in the ocean, according to their website. Okay, you can find more information about them at gc2b.co. Underworks is another company. They've been around longer than GC2B, and they make binders, but they're made for cisgender men who suffer from gynecomastia, which is a condition that causes breast growth. So these are made for assigned male at birth bodies. Many trans folks do prefer them though, especially those with larger chests, because the compression is generally tighter on them than GC2B. But on the downside, that further compression is largely due to the thicker material that they use in comparison to GC2B. So it compresses more, but it's less breathable and less comfortable, in my opinion. I would even describe some of the material on some of their binders as scratchy. Underworks does have many styles that either compress the entire front of your binder, not just the chest. So this could be great for some folks who want to compress also their stomach and hips, but it can be uncomfortable for those who don't expect that extra compression when they bind the binder. Underworks is also one of the only companies that makes binders that look like a t-shirt, so not just a tank top. Okay, third on the list here we have Double Design. They're another less popular brand, but they've been around for a long time. They started as a company catering to lesbians, that's their words on their website, but have since branched out to include transmasculine people. All of their products on their website cater to those that were assigned female at birth. They make all kinds of styles of binders, but they particularly make some great Velcro binders and racerback styles that are very breathable. Unlike Underworks and GC2B though, which run about $40 per binder on average, Double Design's binders are more like $60. Shapeshifters I wanted to throw on this slide simply because they're another trans-owned company, though much smaller. But their main plus is that they make custom-made binders. So if you're not having luck with some of these other brands, you might want to consider getting a custom-made binder from Shapeshifters. They come in a ton of styles and designs, and also run about $60 on average, depending on the size that you need and the kind of print that you want on your binder. So there's many other brands, but these are some of my favorites and some of the most popular. In general, you should stay away from unknown binder brands on Wish or Amazon.com if you can't find any reputable website or reviews for them. Okay, so now we're going to go through how to size yourself. And so this will help you, get an idea of, what size you should be now that you have a little bit more information about what kind of binder you might want. So sizing is super important. Never ever order a binder without taking your measurements first. Sizing across brands can be very different, and you can even be a different size and a different style of the same brand. At DCAT's binder exchange program, we ask for people's measurements, not their sizes, so that we can size you across brands. And we would say 25% of people who submit an application actually mess up their measurements in some way. So the one measurement that all binder brands ask for is a chest measurement. So this is step 1 here. This measurement will be taken at the widest part of your chest. You want to take this measurement when you're not binding or wearing a bra. You wrap the tape measure, basically a cloth or fabric tape measure, all the way around your body and measure the width at the biggest part of your chest. Generally, this is going to be right at your nipples, but it can vary from person to person. And then take that number and round it to the nearest inch. Next, we're going to take a shoulder measurement, but the only binder brand that actually asks for this of the few that I mentioned is GC2B. So GC2B uses your measurement as well because their theory is that it doesn't matter if the binder fits your chest. If you can't get it on over your shoulders because you pull it over your shoulders, then it doesn't matter if it fits your chest or not because it has to also get over your shoulders in order to fit you. So to take your shoulder measurement, you might need some help. You're going to measure your shoulder with point to point. So you don't wrap the tape measure around your body or measure all the way to your side of the arm. You're going to measure your shoulder with point to point. And you're going to take that in inches and round it up to the nearest inch. After you do that, you're going to pull the sizing chart from whichever binder that you are interested in and use it to determine your size. So here's an example from GC2B, and I'll just show you a little bit about how this works. GC2B has the chest size and the shoulder size. So say I measured myself at a 34 inches. If you look at chest size, that puts me somewhere in between a small and a medium, right? And say I had a shoulder width size of 16. So essentially what you do is you look to see what your chest size would be. So I'm either a small or medium. The general rule is that you always size up. So let's put me at a medium with a size of 34 inches. And then you look at what your shoulder width size would be. So say I was a 16, you see that puts me either as a small or a medium or a large. As long as your shoulder width lies within this range, it's fine. But say I was, a size 18 in shoulder width. Well, that would put me more here at a large. So whatever size is larger, your shoulder width size or your chest size, you would go with that. But if your shoulder and your chest size put you in the same size range, then you can just go with that. So in this case, I would put myself at a size medium because my chest size in this example is 34 and my shoulder width size is 16. But if I had a shoulder width size of 18, I would actually bump myself up to a size large. So that's a quick rundown of how to use the GC2B sizing chart, which is probably the most complicated one. So let's show you an example with my friend Elliot. Elliot's chest measurement is 42 inches, and let's say we measured their shoulder at 16 inches. So this example here is just going to show you how much your size can vary across brands or styles. So Elliot is a 2X in GC2B and all their styles. In Double Design, they're also a 2X. But you see it gets tricky when we go over the underworks. They're either a large or an extra large, depending on which style of binder that we're looking at. And then with shapeshifters, they actually have their own sizing system, and they need you to send up to 5 different measurements of your body in order to determine what your size is. So my point here is that Elliot was all over the map with sizing across brands. Even an extra inch could have put them into a different size in a different brand. So you really want to make sure that you take time to size yourself correctly. You won't regret it. You can't take your size from one brand and apply it to another brand. It simply just doesn't work that way. Okay, and lastly, I want to share a few binder programs for folks who can't afford to buy a binder. All of these programs will ship binders to you, but there's actually many more programs that operate at very local levels that don't ship binders, but just give binders in person to folks who live nearby. So before applying to any of these, I would really encourage you to ask your local LGBTQ center if they know any nearby. And if you don't have a local LGBT center or they don't know any nearby, then definitely consider applying to one of these programs. So let me just go through the 4 here. First, we have Point of Pride's binder donation program. They will ship you a binder for free anywhere in the world. But as one of the world's largest free binder programs and one of the only ones that ships globally, they're also very backed up with applications. So as of today, they are processing applications from May 2019, according to their websites. Despite this, they don't have any age restrictions, and they're one of the only programs to ship internationally, which is huge bonus points for them. So if you are interested and don't have other options, I would consider going to their website. It's pointofpride.org/chestbinder donations with a couple dashes in between. Next, we have my organization's binder exchange program. It's just called the DCATS Binder Exchange Program. The program will ship new or gently used binders to those living in the U.S. We do not have any age restrictions either, and we're the only program that I know of that actually allows one exchange if a mistake happens when you did your measurements. We also provide email or video support to those who need help measuring, and currently our waitlist is no longer than a month. A couple other programs here. We have the FTM Essentials Binder Program. FTM Essentials actually sells binders and other products, but they also donate binders to folks under 24 years old who can't afford them in the U.S. So they do have that age restriction, and they're also not a nonprofit because they do sell items. Their process is a little different in that they do a lottery every month to determine who gets a binder versus a first come, first serve situation. They also require you to explain your financial situation to prove your need, which raises some questions about what the actual qualifications to receive a binder are. Nonetheless, I did include them in this list because they are one of the few national binder exchanges that exist that will ship a binder to you. It's unclear if they're currently accepting applications after pausing the program due to the pandemic, but you can check them out on their website, ftmessentials.com. And last, we have a program from Gender Bands. Gender Bands has a number of programs to help the trans community. They will ship a little further than the US. They will also ship to Canada and Mexico. They do not have any age restrictions. Their wait list is unknown, but you can always reach out and email them. The binder program's website is genderbands.org/binders. I hope this information was helpful. If you want to know more about DCAT's Binder Exchange program, please visit binderexchange.org or our general website, dcats.org. If you're looking to volunteer or donate, please send us an email at binderexchange@dcats.org. We're a volunteer-run program, like many of the others that I've talked about, who can only continue to help our community with your support. So if you found any of this information helpful or would like to volunteer your time, please do reach out to me. Thank you.